Hey spooky friends, today we are going to be talking about Miss Pamela Colman Smith, and chances are if you clicked on this video, you may or may not own a tarot deck, or you probably know someone who does. But Miss Pamela Colman Smith is actually the artist and illustrator behind today's standard and most iconic tarot deck. And as you can see, I have my circle tarot deck here. But yes, these are Pamela's pieces. These are her illustrations and artwork. And we are going to do a mini little deep dive about her because she does not get enough credit, in my opinion. She was truly an artist through and through. And she did so many inspiring things, and a lot of people don't really know much about her, and I wanted to sort of pay homage to her with this video, so let's get into it. So Pamela Colman Smith was born February 16th, 1878 in Pimlico, London, making her an Aquarius and a life path number 6. She was born to upper class American parents. Her dad was from Brooklyn, New York. He was a merchant, and his name was Charles Edward Smith. And her mother's name was Corinne Colman. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information or of the background of her mother, but a lot of people like to speculate that she was either Jamaican or East Asian descent. So a lot of people sort of draw the conclusion that Pamela Colman Smith was biracial. And in my opinion, I kind of see it. I can see that she definitely looks biracial, but just from looks alone, you can't always tell. For the first 10 years of Pamela's life, her family lived in Manchester, and then they would later on move to Kingston, Jamaica, because her dad took a job there working for the railroads. In 1893, Pamela moved to Brooklyn, New York, and when she was 15, she enrolled into the Pratt Art Institute there, and she studied under a man named Arthur Wesley Dowell, who was a very influential arts instructor. He was a painter, a printmaker, and a photographer. And while Pamela was away at school in 1896, her mother passed away in Jamaica. And also during that time, she sort of went through a phase where she was on again, off again, struggling with illnesses in her health. And so that caused her to leave the Pratt Art Institute early without a degree. But despite that adversity and that time in her life, she was still doing work for some of her friends and associates. She was an illustrator for one of her friends named William Butler Yeats, who we will talk about later on. But he was a poet, and he was very big into literature. He was a writer, and he also studied the occult. And later on in 1899, her father would pass away, leaving her orphaned at the age of 21. But in that same year, she returned to England, and she continued to work as an artist. And she would do work for a theater group who would affectionately give her the nickname Pixie. A couple years later in London, she opened a studio where she would host open houses for artists, authors, and actors, and she would basically use that to showcase their work, and she would also network with a lot of creatives and artists just like her. She also illustrated a lot of Jamaican folklore books and fairy tale type books, and she just, continued to be an artist. She was a huge supporter of women's rights and a very big feminist, and she also donated some of her time to the Red Cross during World War I. In the year 1901, Pamela's friend William Yeats, who we talked about earlier, would introduce her to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which in the early 1900s was basically a secret society where they studied the occult. They liked to learn about alchemy, astrology, paranormal activity, witchy stuff like that. And while she was a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn, that is where she met Arthur Edward Waite, and he would sort of collaborate with her and ask Pamela to work on tarot cards, and he wanted to have her bring her sort of touch, her artwork to the tarot deck. Now, from my understanding, there was already a tarot deck before the Arthur Waite Smith tarot deck, but it didn't have a lot of imagery. The imagery wasn't very good. It wasn't, very captivating. Nothing like that. So he really wanted Pamela to bring her touch to the tarot deck. And while Pamela was working as an artist, it is said that she got a lot of inspiration through music. So she would just put music on, and it would be this very spiritual experience for her where she could visualize what she was going to create and the colors and the imagery, and she would just use music to help bring her pieces alive. So the tarot deck that we know and love today was created by Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Colman Smith, or Pixie, and it was released in the year 1909, so early 1900s. And the deck now is regarded as a standard set with more than 100 million copies in circulation. And Pamela's imagery has been synonymous with tarot itself, and it's the world's most popular 78 tarot deck. Now, despite being the artist behind the most iconic tarot deck, Pamela would go on to not generate a lot of income from this, unfortunately. And I could only imagine how hard it would have been to be such a forward-thinking artist and woman in her time period. She was just way ahead of her time. And that makes me really sad that she wasn't able to get the notoriety and credit that she so very much deserved from this tarot deck while she was alive. But luckily now we can talk about her, we can acknowledge her, and we can pay homage to her. As a lot of us witches use tarot decks, I'm a professional tarot reader. I love her imagery. Her imagery really speaks to me. And it's really hard for me to use any other type of tarot deck with different imagery because her illustrations are easier for me to read. It just translates better for me as a reader personally. So even though she didn't generate a lot of income after making the tarot deck, she definitely kept creating art. I know she had a magazine where she would showcase women's writings and poetry, and it was mostly women that she would showcase, women writers, which I think is just lovely. She was a girl's girl. We love her. And unfortunately, that didn't make her a lot of money, and she was really struggling financially. And I know later on in 1911, she actually converted to Catholicism, and she would link up with a woman named Nora Lake, where they would rent out sort of like what we would consider now as like an Airbnb. She would have an Airbnb for priests, and that was a way for her to generate income. And there's also a lot of speculation that she may have been an LGBTQ queen. There was a lot of speculation that her and Nora Lake were romantically involved, but we don't know that for sure. She was an artist until the very end, even though she was unable to publish any of her work. She passed away in her apartment on September 18th, 1951. She was 73 years old. Her possessions were auctioned off to pay off any of her debt. And unfortunately, the location of her gravesite is unknown, but it is said that she's buried in an unmarked grave in St. Michael's Cemetery in Bude in the UK. And that makes me kind of sad because imagine how many tarot readers would love to leave, offerings or visit her grave, but maybe it's better that way where she can just rest peacefully. Another fun fact that I learned about is that her partner, Arthur Waite, who created the tarot deck with her, him and Aleister Crowley, I guess, had beef. Aleister Crowley really did not like Arthur Waite, and he would go on to call him like a fraud and that he was very uneducated, and they just didn't like each other. They had beef with each other. So, fun fact. But yeah, the next time you pick up a tarot deck, maybe give thanks to Pamela Colman Smith, or just think about her, and we can all recognize her as the beautiful artist that she was in her time. And it's very sad because I feel like with creatives, they really don't get the notoriety they deserve while they're living. And it's usually after they have passed and years, decades, centuries have gone by where we start to appreciate their work and really give them the respect that they deserve. But Pamela is definitely one of those people. And so the next time you go to buy a tarot deck, you can think about her and you can appreciate her artwork. So that is a little mini deep dive on Pamela Colman Smith. Like I said, she was an Aquarius in a life path 6. And I just think she was a beautiful artist through and through. And she just did what she loved. And she did it until the very end, until she passed away. So I think the takeaway from Miss Pamela would be just to do what you love, regardless of money or anything like that. If it's a spiritual calling that you're wanting to do, you just do it, and you do it with love and passion. But alrighty, thanks for watching, everyone. And I hope you learned something today. I know I did while I was researching her, and I really felt like a connection with her and just a deep appreciation for her work. And I think I'm going to do more little deep dives on some occult history figures. So stay tuned. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.